Hi, welcome again. Here you can see we have an animating plane with some waves. So now we're going to recreate this from scratch. So let's get started. Alright, now we are in an empty map. So let's create a new blueprint with OpenLand Mesh. Right click, blueprint class. And here I'm going to search for OpenLand Mesh. Alright. And then I'm going to select and give it a name like animating plane. Then I'm going to double click this. And now we have the OpenLand Mesh actor. Cool. I'm going to go to the function section, hit override, and click this get polygon mesh. Now we're going to create a plane over there. So I'm going to right click and search for OpenLand Mesh. So here we have a couple of options. I'm going to select make plane mesh. I'm going to connect this and like this. Then I'm going to hit compile. So now we can see a plane over there. Cool. Now we need this plane to be on the other way around, so we can do some transformation. I'm gonna make some room over there. I'm gonna select the return value and drag it a little bit and drop, and I'm gonna search for transform. In the OpenLand Mesh section, so we have a function called transform. I'm gonna select that. I'm gonna connect it like this. Then I'm gonna right click on this transformer and select split struct pin. From the rotation, I'm gonna set -90 to my X rotation. Then I'm going to hit compile. So now we have a plane like this. Then I'm going to hit the components tab, select the root component. So I'm going to put some material. You can use any material you like. I like to use my MI green material, and then I would like to give some subdivision like 5 subdivisions. Then I'm going to enable run CPU vertex modifiers, and also I'm going to hit animate. Here you can use GPU vertex modifiers as well. The workflow is almost the same, but you are working with material instead of this blueprints. Here I like to use CPU vertex modifiers, and let's go with that. Then I'm going to hit compile. So let's go to the wireframe mode and confirm we have enough vertices. Alright, we can work with this. Now let's create our vertex modifier. I'm going to go to my blueprint tab and go to the functions override, and I'm going to select on modify vertex. Okay, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to right click on this payload, split. Here on the return value, split. Now we have the input position, and this is output position. We can do something in between. So how can we animate? The simplest way we can animate is using a sine function. So let's give it a try, and after that we can see how this works. So I'm gonna get the payload time in seconds. So this is a time is incrementing in seconds, and I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna select sine. So here we have sine radians. This time second is continuous number, so 0 to some big number, and then sine is always returning -1 to 1. So you can see we have cycle between -1 and 1. So that's the basics of animation. Then we need to multiply this with some number, let's say 30. So now we have a range between -30 to 30. Then I'm going to multiply this with a vector. So I'll explain why in a moment. So I'm going to hit z-axis to 1. Okay, then I'm going to grab my position. I'm going to add to another vector. I'm going to connect this, and I'm going to set that as a modified position, and I'm going to select the control pin or the flow pin. Right, I'm going to hit compile. Then I'm going to simulate. Now you can see in the viewport, so we can see this plane is going up and down. So basically this is what's happening. So when you got the sine function with some time, so we get the range between -1 to 1. Then we multiply that by 30, so we get the range between 30 to -30. Okay, and then we multiply this with a vector with the z-axis to 1. So basically we change in the z-axis on this vector, and we add that vector to the original position, and that's how we get this one. All right, that's pretty simple as that. All right, now we have a moving plane, but this is not interesting. Let's try to do something interesting. So I like to create some wave pattern. For that one, I'm gonna get the distance from this root position, and we can input that into the sine function, and let's try to see what we can do. So let's make some room like this. I'm gonna get the position. I'm gonna hit distance. With this, we can get the distance from the center, the root position. Okay, and then I'm gonna grab the value, and I'm going to put that into my sine function, and I'm going to hit compile. So now we get something crazy like this. The reason is this distance is too much. So I'm going to get this value, and I'm going to multiply by some number. Let's say 0.5 2 maybe, and I'm going to connect that to my sine function and compile. Alright, now we can see something like this. I think the reason is this number 30 we call as amplitude is too high. Let's put some smaller value like 3. Alright, now we get something like this and we are on the right path. So if we need more waves, we can increase this number like 0.3. Alright, like this. Now we have something interesting. Now you can see some triangles and this mesh look. We can easily fix that by fixing the normals. So I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna hit the components tab. So I'm gonna stop the simulation. Then I'm gonna select the root component, and I'm gonna, from the details panel, I'm gonna set the smooth angles to 90, and I'm gonna hit compile. You can even try to increase the subdivisions and get a really nice look, but let's do it later on. Now let's try to hit the simulate button, but it doesn't do anything. The reason is we don't have time information and the distance is fixed, and that's why there's no animation. All right, let's try to get this time and add that to the input of the sine function. I'm gonna get this seconds time. I'm gonna add it to a float. All right, I'm gonna hit compile. Okay, and then I'm gonna hit simulate. Now you can see we're animating. It's quite slow. So let's try to increase the speed. For that one, we can simply multiply this seconds value with a float, and let's give it some value like 3. I'm gonna connect it over there, and I'm gonna hit compile, simulate. So now we have a pretty simple animation. We can of course continue working on this, but we can do that later on in a different video. So right now I'll try to show you a couple of things. So here we have some values. It would be really nice we can convert these constants into parameters or variables, so we can control that from the editor or via blueprints. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to hit promote to variable, and I'm going to give it that name to a speed. So likewise I'll try to add variables to each and every constant values. Alright, now we have 4 variables: root position, speed, frequency, and the amplitude. And we need to expose these values to the editor, so we can click this icon and compile and save. So now let's try to add this into our map and see how it looks. So I'm going to drag this plane, and it's quite small. Let's try to scale this from the transform over here. I'm gonna hit 5, right? Something like this. So let's try to add a sphere on top and let it simulate with the physics. So from the place actors, I'm gonna grab a sphere, put it over here and position like this, and I'll scale it down like this. Then I'm gonna select that and go to the details panel and make sure to enable simulate physics. And I'm gonna save it and I'm gonna run the map. So now we can see this ball is simulating with the animation, and this is quite nice. Then I think we need to have more subdivisions in this case. Let me add some subdivisions, 6 subdivisions, and let me play the game. All right, now it looks nice. Then I'm going to hit shift and F1. Then I can control the editor, and I'm going to select the animating plane. Now we have in the default section of the details panel, we have some values, so we can change them. For example, we can increase the speed like this, maybe a value like this, and we can change the amplitude, increase it, decrease it, and yep, like this. Here we are simply editing these values inside the editor, but we can change this value from a blueprint or maybe some other way. With that, we can get some interactivity with our animation, and we can do very interesting things. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. See you soon with another one. Bye.